So this is the last in our week of MIM extensions webinars, and this one is Identity Panel, which is a product from a company called Software IDM, and I'm very keen to tell you all about the clever things that it can do. So without further ado, I will just quickly put up our who we are kind of slide. As I say, this is the last of these demos. If you missed any, you want to see them, go to our website and you'll be able to find your way there, I'm sure. And I'll be putting up addresses and so on at the end of this demo. So mostly today is going to be about demo, but I've got a few slides just to set things up. So let's start off by just positioning Identity Panel against MIM, Microsoft Identity Manager. So reliable access management, I would say, starts with reliable identity lifecycle management, and MIM is really good at this, and it can connect to just about anything. So it's a really great engine, but there are a few areas where it needs some help. First of all, there's no built-in scheduler, and if you talk to different consultants, they'll all have different ideas about how to set up scheduling. They'll either write their own little scheduling service, or they'll perhaps use Windows scheduler. They might simply write a script which runs repeatedly, but there's no standard way of doing it. There's no built-in scheduler. Second, there's the reporting is a bit limited. First of all, it needs SCSM, which implies a certain amount of overhead, and it is limited to what's in the portal, not what's in the sync engine. And it doesn't offer point-in-time reporting. It does do historical reporting in the sense that it records all the changes, but what it doesn't offer is the ability to say, what did that group look like at that time? Who were the members of that group at that point in time? Or what did that person look like at that point in time? Or indeed to do any kind of report at a particular point in time. And the last thing is that it's a bit limited on health checks. It does basic event logging, so as long as you can pick up those events that are logged, you can take some kind of action on them. If only there was a product that offered scheduling with all the bells and whistles that go with that, so you would want to be able to test for conditions, to be able to skip unnecessary steps for optimization purposes, test for undesirable conditions and stop the schedule from running, send an alert to say that something had happened, something bad or something good, possibly even take some kind of remedial action. Reporting, a complete history of all the data flowing through the sync engine as well as metadata from the portal. By metadata, I mean the information about requests, who requested something and who authorized it perhaps, and maybe some other stuff in the portal, with point-in-time reporting to go with that. Sorry. And health checks. We want to know about whether the services are running, if there are problems with disk space, what's going on with passwords, workflow, and request queues. Are they getting too big? And we would want workflows to act on that data and to either remediate where possible or send an alert. Well, Identity Panel does all of this and more, and I will be demoing all of the above to some level anyway for the on-premises offering of Identity Panel with MIM. By the way, everything I say applies to FIM as well as MIM, FIM being the forerunner of MIM in case you didn't know. But also, and I won't be demoing this, but I'm just calling it out, also it does have providers, that is connectors, I guess, for ADFS, Active Directory, Office 365, and Azure AD Connect. In other words, it can pull identity data out of those, either completely independently, or it can relate them to the MIM data. So we could look at a particular identity, an individual, a user, a group, whatever, and see what they look like in all of those systems, as well as in the various parts of MIM. It also has a few other modules. Uplift provides codeless provisioning and more, and MIM Test is a testing harness for MIM. I can't really say much else about those, there just isn't time. It's also available as a software as a service offering. So I'm showing you the on-premises version. There is a cloud version of Identity Panel. This is what my demo environment looks like. I have got my usual kind of MIM setup. So on one server, I've got MIM, I've got the MIM portal, I've got an HR system which is providing me with authoritative source of truth type data about my users. MIM portal is being used to manage groups particularly. And then I'm provisioning into Active Directory, maybe into some other directory. It doesn't really matter. We could be talking to any number of directories. And then also in this demo environment, I've configured Identity Panel. And so this is a number of services and executables. Importantly, it is pulling data out of MIM and controlling MIM as well, by the way. I could have drawn those arrows differently. And it is storing that data in MongoDB, which is a database very suited to what it's being used for here. And the whole thing is browser-based, so the way I'm going to get to that data is through a browser. Just to give you the idea that it can be a lot more complicated. I mean, obviously you wouldn't normally have everything crammed into one server. It's perfectly capable of running on lots of different systems for different purposes. So we might be monitoring Azure AD Connect on one server, and we might be monitoring Azure through another server, and MIM Sync through another server. We might have more than one server for handling some of the activities for the purposes of high availability. And then we're storing everything in MongoDB, and again, that can be done on a high availability basis. So I don't really want to focus too much on this. I'm just giving you the idea that this is all grown-up stuff. It's not really all normally crammed onto one box. Apologies for this. So I seem to have got yeah, so we're going to do a demo now. Let's get out of PowerPoint. And I've got a virtual machine as I just described. So everything crammed onto one virtual machine in which I'm got everything I need running. So let's just think about what normally goes on in the synchronization service. We've got a number of different things we're connecting to, just 4 things in this case, as I described. And when I want to do some kind of a run, I'll be doing typically an import, perhaps a Delta import, and then a synchronization of some kind, and perhaps an export to each of these management agents in turn, so that I gradually synchronize all the data between them, and I'll have something doing the scheduling. And as that runs, I end up with an operations history, so a history of each run, and I could hunt and peck through these runs, and I might find something of interest, I might not. So for example there, I've got a number of updates. I could use a hyperlink to get to those. I could go and look at Adrian, but my problem here is that I'm only looking at Adrian as he looks right now in the sync service. I've lost any historical data about the attributes, what they were at the time that this activity happened. So at the time that this update took place, it could have looked completely different than it looks now. Also, this history is typically incomplete. I mean, it's incomplete in that sense, in the sense that I don't have the data behind these runs, but it's also incomplete in the sense that it is normal and indeed absolutely necessary to clear the runs from time to time, otherwise the database becomes clogged up. Now I've got the same kind of thing going on in the portal. If we look at the MIM portal, I'm managing security groups here. I've got groups. These will be perhaps query-based groups, or they could be manual groups. I'll have distribution groups as well. I'm going to have all my users. But I've got all sorts of other things going on here. I've got request data, requests to join a group, and I've got approvals for those and everything else. And that also, we have a retention policy here, which typically, or out of the box anyway, is going to clear out any historical data after 30 days. So the amount of historical information is limited in different dimensions. So now let's look at the tool of interest here, and it is here. So here's a dashboard for Identity Panel. So straight away, what I've got is the recent run history. Now that's equivalent to the run history I was just looking at. The difference is that it's complete. We can keep that for as long as we like. The second thing is that if I drill down to any data, and let's quickly do that, I'm just going to show you the run history in a little more detail. I'm then going to filter it, which I can do quite quickly, for all those runs where something was happening, anything was happening, because many of the runs, nothing was going on. And if I focus again on a particular one, and note that there is Adrian again, the same guy I was just looking at. If I use the hyperlink there, not only can I look at what he looks like now, but I can go back in time and look at all the points where anything interesting happened. And I can simply go to a particular point like this and see the exact state that he was in there, and I'll be spending a bit more time on this later. Or I can step through and say, well, let's go forward in time and forward again in time and so on. So I've got a complete history, but I'll come back to that in a moment. That's called the time traveler. A couple of other things. What have I got? I've got something about the panel service telling me recent activity in the panel service. Okay, that's useful. I can have charts for all sorts of things. I haven't got a very exciting one here. This is a demo system, but you can see I've got a number of password resets. And all of these things tend to be interactive. So if I hover over that, there it says that there's a number of password resets went through on that day, and I can actually bring up the points at which the runs, the scheduling runs, which pulled that data out. And perhaps I ought to say at this point that the scheduling is intimately tied up with the gathering of historical data. So up at the top right here, for example, I could manually run my regular cycle. Now that regular cycle will go on anyway on its own, just as you would expect, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But the point is that as I run that, I'll just run it, but you'll just see it gradually running through. As I run it, it's gathering data at the same time. So these two things are intimately tied together. Just to complete the picture of the dashboard, at the bottom here, I've got my health checks, various health checks. You'll see some of them have failed and they demand some kind of action. I deliberately set it up to show different things. And you'll see that it's happy that the schedule's run recently, less happy about the password queue, there's a problem there, happy that it's been backed up, but I've got a problem with SQL disk space, and so on. So you can set up all sorts of health checks, and we'll go into that as well. So the first thing I want to show you is the scheduling. Let's look at how scheduling is configured. So I've got just one schedule. Now, of course, normally you would have a number of different schedules in MIM. You might have a schedule that you run on a regular basis every 15 minutes or minute or hour or whatever it is that you run every day. And this will typically just go through export, import, sync for every management agent, and here they are. But I've got some additional things. At the bottom, I have additionally, I'm doing a scan of the portal, and I'm also doing a scan of any password changes that have gone through. So you'll set up this sequence and let it run through. But it's more interesting than that. I mean, first of all, we have to notice that, of course, there's a schedule. And this is scheduled to run every 15 minutes, starting at midnight until the end of the day. And it happens every day and every week. So obviously, you can configure that as you see fit. Now, I have not actually enabled this cycle because this is a demo system and I don't want it just running in the background. But it could be, and it would normally be. But some of the things you can do, let's have a look at this full import from HR. Now, if you do an import from HR and nothing interesting is imported, you might want to say, well, you know, there's not a lot of point in going through and doing the rest of it. It wastes time. So as an optimization issue, you might put in here a rule that says, if all the counters are 0, then skip. Okay, skip the next step. Don't even bother synchronizing. So that's one possibility. And let's look at another possibility. Let's look at this export to Active Directory. Now, one of the scary things that can happen with Active Directory is that because of some poor data that was provided, you end up deleting an awful lot of accounts. So a check that you sometimes like to do before you do the run is to say, check how many export deletes there are. And as long as it's, we'll say, less than 10, go right ahead. But if it's 10 or more, then we'll pause the entire schedule. We'll also, by the way, cause that to, I'm not going to show you this, but we can get that to, as a result of that, send an alert to say, hey, there's a problem, you've got to do something about it. But all that'll happen each time it goes around is it'll keep pausing every time it runs and not running the rest of the steps. So those are the kinds of things that you can do, and I'm only scratching the surface here. Really, you have all the bells and whistles you need to run a schedule well. Okay, so when that schedule runs, we as a result get a history. This history is complete, so while if I go back to here, while I recently cleared the operations here, and I've only got, what is it, about maybe 30 or 40 steps in the operations log here, if I change this to some other number, you'll see that I got a big long list of all the history forever and ever and ever and ever. And I can filter it very quickly. This is something you can't do in MIM. As you saw before, I could say, show me any statistics, but I could also say, show me, let me do that again, sorry, show me all the ones that had export errors. Actually, there's only one, and I could now look at that and say, oh, well, we've got an export error on this guy, Max, not quite sure what's going on there. Let's take a look at him. We can see straight away that there's something a little bit odd going on there because he's doesn't seem to have got a full set of attributes. So he's a badly formed user, and we would have to go and find out what that's all about. So let's next focus a little bit on the health checks and how they're done. So I'm going to go to providers, and providers are in a sense connectors, but they're something slightly different. So I have a provider for MIM, but I could have a provider for AD, ADFS, and so on and so forth. I'm going to show you a health provider. So this is where we define health checks. And I've got two groups of health probes. So a probe is a single health check device that will return a particular thing, a tick, or a value that'll go on your dashboard. So this one is the one that tells us that the schedule is running. It does a count and tells us that the schedule has at least run in the last 3 hours. Okay, so it's a nice simple one. We could look at SQL disk space. This one returns a fail. In other words, it will put up an alert, a big red exclamation mark, if there's less than 14, so that would be 1.4 gigabytes. So that's, I guess, 14,000 megabytes, so roughly speaking, 14 gigabytes of space across all the relevant disks. I could look at, sorry, let's look at another one. We could look at the portal and we could do something simple like just see that a service is running. So this will fail if the service is not running. And of course I might have multiple servers involved in this and multiple services, and I'd want to be able to define those as well, which I could perfectly well do. So again, I'm going to have to go quite quickly to fit all of this in, but you get the idea, I hope, that you can set up all sorts of health checks that relate to the health of the MIM system and other systems. And having defined them, you can then get them to appear on your dashboard, but also, and I won't show you this, but also you can have workflows that are kicked off by the results of these. So for example, if you had a SQL disk-based problem, you'd certainly want to be alerted by that. If you had a service that wasn't running, well, you might be able to remediate that by kicking off the service again. Of course, you'd probably also want to know that the service has stopped running because it's not something you want happening. Okay, so that's hopefully given you a little bit of a view of scheduling and of the health checks. Okay, let's now talk about the historical data that's being kept. Now, I already showed you briefly that from the history, if you see a statistic of some kind, let's just show you that again. If you see a statistic of some kind, then you can zoom in on the person concerned and you get to see them in what's called the time traveler. But you can also, at any time you like, go to the search box here and you can search for something. I'm searching for somebody called whose username, whose account name in AD is Alison B. And I'm going to search for that person. Now that search takes place by default across all attributes on all identities everywhere. And the result is that, as it happens, it's quite unique. Alison B isn't found in lots of places. If I'd put something like sales in, it would have found the word sales all over the place. You can narrow that search in lots of ways, which I will only go into if I've got time. But what you'll find is that in a number of different, well, I'm going to have to now start using the word silo. So in a number of different identity silos, such as AD, HR, the metaverse, the MIM portal, all of these are silos. So a silo, for our purposes today, we'll say that a silo is either the MIM portal, a metaverse, or the connector spaces associated with the various management agents. If you're familiar at all with the architecture of MIM, you'll know that there are lots of identity objects, lots of objects representing each identity. So this user, Alison, exists in lots of times in the connector space, one for each MA that she's associated with, but also in the metaverse and in HR. So I can, having done this search and found a person of interest, I can now click that, and it brings up the current status of that person. Actually, I need to just go forward one step in time to now. That is the current status for Alison in the HR system in the connector space, which really means the HR system to all intents and purposes. It's not literally looking in the HR system, it's looking at MIM's idea of what's in the HR system, but these are so closely allied that you can almost say they're the same thing. In Active Directory, in ADLDS, in the MIM portal, and in the metaverse, all shown side by side so that I can see her status, her attributes in all of these things. And it does some other clever things. Not only does it give who her manager is, but it gives who is managed by her, or who or what, by the way, is managed by her. So what you've got is for every reference attribute, there'll be a reverse of attribute created. And that means we can see member of. So we can see which groups she's a member of. If we were looking at a group, we'd see who the members are. And this is all handled for you in the background without any fuss and bother, and it's all beautifully scalable and so on. So we're now looking at her at this point in time. But if I click the drop down here, you'll see that things happen to her at various times. And we can trace her from the moment that she first came in from HR. And if I step forward, we can see her being provisioned into the other systems and gradually see the data filling up as synchronization takes place and she gets provisioned into various systems. Later on, other changes will happen and we'll see those changes go through. I'm going to keep going forward because I think we might shortly see something of interest. So anything that's in green is an addition, and you'll see that here she's just become a member of sales, and that's shown in green, and that propagates through, of course, everywhere else. What else might we look for? Anything that is in blue is a modified setting. Okay, so there we see that she had a password reset, and we can see that password reset going through AD, and there are other ways in which we can see a password reset as well. Of course, we can't see her password, but we can see that a reset took place, and we can see when it took place. If I keep going forward, we'll see a change here to the HR department. Now, the change in the HR department should lead to a lot of other changes. For example, she'll get moved into the HR department in other silos. And if we keep going forward, I've just gone further than I intended. Here you can see that she's about to get an addition, that is green, of the membership of HR, and the removal, the deletion in red of sales. So she gets moved out of the sales group and into the HR group because her department changed from sales to HR. So hopefully you get the idea that we can look at her state at any point in time, any time that something happened to her. If we go and look at one of these groups that just changed, let's look at the HR group. Now I can jump straight to the time traveler for that by just clicking this link here. So these links are always live. And again, we're going to get a number of places where things changed here. And we could go back in time and perhaps look at the pretty much at the start of this. We might not have actually got the start of this one, but we'll see that here are a whole bunch of new members. In fact, I'm going to look at this the other way around. I'm going to make the portal the focus here. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because the portal is authoritative for groups. So let's look at the whole life cycle starting from the beginning. So here's a brand new group coming from the portal along with some members. And here are the people being, here are the groups along with the membership being provisioned into AD. As we go forward, any changes that subsequently happen, there's a green, there's a new one coming through, results in a change in AD. If we keep going, there's a red, there's one coming out. That also will result in a change in AD, and so on. And so we can see that what the state of objects are at any point in time. There's also a report module. So there'll be a number of different reports that are available to us. So for example, I might look at all active users. Now there's nothing fancy about this. We could probably get a report of all active users from all over the place. We could get it out of the metaverse. We could probably persuade all sorts of systems to give us such a list. What's unique here is that I can get that at any point in time. I can say, show me who all the active users were on this day at this time, and rerun that and get a different report. And I can apply that logic to any of my reports. I have a number of sort of standard-ish reports here, but they're easy enough to create new ones. But if you don't want to create them, you can go on to the Identity Panel website where there are lots of examples, and you can download those and upload them and make them work the way you want to. You might be interested in password resets. So I can look at password resets in the last 30 days. But I could look at password resets in the last 1 day, which probably wouldn't be very exciting. But I can also look at password resets in the 10 days up to a different point in time. So again, without laboring the point, all of these reports, I didn't find any data. I didn't get lucky with the data there, but let's try something slightly different. There, we've got a number of changes. Alison Brown had 2 changes, and these guys had 1 change. And of course, I can go and look at these. If actually, I don't have drill down on these, but I could drill down to these in general. So without laboring the point, all of these reports are available on a point-in-time basis. So let's just, while we've got a little bit of time left, I'll just quickly look at a few other things. I want to point out that there is a security based on roles. So we'll have an admin role, but we might have various user roles. And for users, we can decide which attributes they can see. This is grant all, but you can have include and exclude lists of attributes they're allowed to see, because some users, perhaps, you might have a help desk support who are not supposed to see certain attributes, but they still want to support password resets and things like that. We can make different features like the dashboard, history, and so on, or the settings available or not. You probably wouldn't want a user to be playing with the settings, for example. And there's a whole load of other data permissions we can set, so a very granular level of security, and we give people different roles according to either Azure AD or AD groups. So these are the groups here that we're giving them, and we can give them different views and restrict what they can see. As I say, we can connect to various different things. I won't go into any more detail on that. We've seen writing schedules. You can define different dashboards for different people. So this is the dashboard definition that we were just looking at, which shows the run history and view schedules and so on. We can have different dashboards for different roles. And after that, it's getting into some more complex areas, which I probably shouldn't go into. Okay, so let's do a bit of a review of what we've just been talking about, a summary. Let's get our PowerPoint back here. And in summary then, these are the sorts of pain points that we're addressing. You know, I can't visualize identity data. You saw how you can see the identity data in the different silos next to each other. MIM gets broken and we don't get alerted, and we can't readily identify a problem. So now we have a way of getting alerted and then quickly being able to drill down, possibly even automatically remediate a problem. There's no audit trail for MIM itself and no integrated audit trail for all these other systems. They may have their own audit trails. But what we have then is an ability not only to audit MIM, what's going through MIM, but also we can see all of the identity information for all of those silos next to each other. And no forensic capability with regard to identity data, in other words, who had access on what day, but now, of course, you see that we can. So it addresses particular feature gaps in MIM, scheduling, health checks with alerts and remediation, and full history with point-in-time reporting. So the sorts of benefits we're getting is that it's monitoring MIM and other identity repositories, by the way, stores all the changes, making historical identity data available through on-screen queries and reports for audit, forensic queries, so on and so forth. It also manages and schedules MIM, and as I mentioned, that's intimately tied up with the gathering of data. It also can send alerts and do some remediation based on that management. Obviously, it allows tracing of changes from source to target. You saw that. You see the changes come in from one system, go out to the other systems, and importantly, you can see the state of an object at any date and time. And of course, these attributes like job title, department, and so on, and certainly membership of group, will typically affect the access that people get in different systems. So there are perhaps the 4 points to take away to remember, and if you want further information, then make sure that you can email info@oxfordcomputergroup.com, and also, of course, you can visit our website for more information. Now, I'm going to put up a quick poll here because we're interested to see whether anybody would like a more detailed demonstration. So we could do a demo which is a bit more attuned to your particular needs. So if you know, we can look at what you the management agents that you've got, and we can do a demo that's a bit more attuned to what you need. And of course, you know, whatever your needs are, you can contact us and we'll try and help you. Okay, so we are getting the votes in gradually, and we're getting some pretty good interest, and I see that the rate of votes is slowing down, so I'll leave that up for a moment. We'll close that poll shortly. So the other thing I want to do is give you an opportunity to ask any questions. Please do key in any questions that you might have. I'm not going to unmute you because it gets a bit out of hand when we do that. So I got a question here which is, you know, how well does it scale? Our experience is that this really scales extremely well. Not only does it seem to be very well optimized anyway, but because of the ability to have multiple instances across different servers for different purposes, it's possible to spread the load, and you know, so you get your high availability and your performance. The licensing model, there's a question about that. The licensing model is that it's a fixed license or an annual license for the on-premise version, and it's per user for the cloud, the SaaS version. So that gives some real flexibility there, and the SaaS version would perhaps be very suitable for a smaller company with a smaller number of users. Once you get up to a certain number of users, you may as well pay the sort of on-premise standard licensing. Another question from the same person is language packs for UI. So what I didn't show you is that there is it is localizable. Okay, so you can definitely define different languages for all the attribute names and the other names that you have throughout the system. I don't think there are any actual language packs available, but I think that's one of those things where when somebody you know, said, "Oh, I need a language pack for whatever," I think I've seen a couple actually, now that I think about it, that language packs could quite easily be made available, and but the capability is there, let's say. And if you have a very specific question about that, Eugene, then send us a question to info@oxfordcomputergroup.com and we will try and give you a better answer than that. Okay, so I am not seeing any other questions. If you've got any more questions, please type them in. If you think of a question just afterwards, then please get back. You can always email us, as I say, info@oxfordcomputergroup.com. We're very interested in any kind of feedback you can give us or questions you can ask us about this, about the demo, and about its capabilities. But if there are no further questions, I'm going to say thank you very much for attending, everybody, and we will no doubt be publishing other webinars on other interesting topics. Many of them will be MIM related, and we'll let you know, so watch this space. And thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the weekend.